Every motivation speaker tells you to visualize your goals, to see yourself successful, to imagine the results you want. I'm going to tell you the opposite, and it's going to make some people angry. Visualizing results is destroying your potential. When you spend mental energy imagining yourself wealthy, fit, successful, or accomplished, your brain experiences a dopamine hit as if you've already achieved it. You get the emotional reward without doing the work. Then when it's time to actually execute, your motivation is depleted because your brain already got its payoff. The people achieving extraordinary things aren't fantasizing about outcomes. They're obsessed with the next task, the next repetition, the next improvement. Stop daydreaming about where you want to be and start obsessing over what you're doing right now. You know what separates the person who achieves extraordinary success from the person who struggles their entire life? It's not talent. It's not connections. It's not even luck. The difference comes down to one simple thing: where they place their attention. The struggling person wakes up every morning and immediately checks their bank account, refreshes their social media follower account, steps on the scale, or looks at their sales dashboard. The successful person wakes up and asks themselves a completely different question: what excellent work can I do today? This distinction changes everything, and I mean everything. Right now, at this very moment, millions of people are sabotaging their own success without even realizing it. They're working hard, putting in the hours, making sacrifices, but they're focused on the wrong thing. They're obsessed with results. They check their progress constantly. They measure their worth by outcomes they can't fully control. And this obsession, this constant monitoring of results, creates a psychological trap that guarantees underperformance. Let me explain why this happens. When you focus on results, you create anxiety. Every time you check that number, that metric, that outcome, you're essentially asking yourself, am I good enough yet? Have I made it? Am I worthy? And when the number isn't what you want it to be, which is most of the time during the building phase, you experience disappointment. This disappointment drains your energy, it kills your motivation, it makes you question whether you should even continue. But there's something even more destructive happening beneath the surface. When you're obsessed with results, you can't focus on the work itself. Your mind is divided. Part of you is doing the task, but another part is constantly calculating, measuring, wondering if this effort will pay off. You're never fully present. You're never fully engaged. And without full engagement, you never produce your best work. You never enter that state of flow where excellence becomes natural and time disappears. Think about this for a moment. Every successful business person, every championship athlete, every acclaimed artist has learned this fundamental truth: results are a consequence, not a target. Results happen when you get the process right. Results appear when you fall in love with the daily work. Results show up when you stop chasing them and start crafting excellent performance day after day after day. The irony is beautiful and maddening at the same time. The moment you stop obsessing over results is the moment results start improving. The moment you redirect all that mental energy from checking outcomes to perfecting your craft is the moment your trajectory changes. This isn't motivational philosophy. This is practical psychology that determines whether you succeed or fail. Consider what happens in your typical day. You're working on an important project. Every 30 minutes, you stop to check your email, hoping for good news. You refresh your analytics, looking for progress. You calculate how far you are from your goal. Each of these interruptions breaks your concentration. Each one pulls you out of deep work. Each one reduces the quality of what you're producing. You think you're being productive because you're monitoring progress, but you're actually guaranteeing mediocrity. The truly successful person operates completely differently. They set a goal, yes, but then they shift their entire focus to the process. They identify the specific activities that, when done with excellence, will naturally produce the results they want. Then they become obsessed with those activities. They fall in love with the work itself. They measure their success not by outcomes, but by whether they executed their process with integrity and excellence. This approach creates freedom. When you're obsessed with the work, you control your entire day. You decide what excellence looks like. You determine whether you succeeded by whether you did what you committed to do. You're no longer a slave to external validation or market conditions or other people's responses. You're a craftsman who takes pride in the work itself, regardless of immediate outcomes. No, I understand this goes against everything our culture teaches us. We live in a results-obsessed world. Everyone wants to know your numbers, your metrics, your achievements. Social media has made it worse because everyone is constantly displaying their results, creating the illusion that success happens overnight. But I'm telling you, based on decades of studying high achievers across every field, his results, obsession is the very thing preventing most people from achieving what they're capable of. The shift I'm describing requires courage because you have to trust the process, even when you can't see immediate results. You have to believe that excellent daily work compounds over time. You have to maintain your standards even when nobody's watching and nothing seems to be happening. This is where most people fail. They can't tolerate the gap between the work and the results. They need constant feedback. They need immediate gratification. And because they need it, they never develop the patience and persistence required for significant achievement. Well, Nimitz A, but here's what happens when you make this shift. First, your work quality improves dramatically because you're fully present. Second, you develop genuine skill because you're focused on mastery rather than metrics. Third, you build resilience because your self-worth isn't tied to outcomes you can't control. Fourth, you actually enjoy the journey instead of being miserable until you reach some arbitrary destination. And fifth, the results you are desperately chasing start showing up naturally as a byproduct of your excellent work. This isn't theory. This is how excellence actually works in the real world. And I'm going to show you exactly how to implement this in your life, starting with a story that illustrates this principle in action. Let me tell you about a man named Richard. 3 years ago, Richard was running a small consulting business, and he was absolutely miserable. Every single morning, the first thing he did was check his bank account balance. Then he'd review his client list, counting how many active contracts he had. Then he'd refresh his website analytics to see if anyone had visited his site overnight. By the time he actually started working, he was already emotionally exhausted. Richard had fallen into the trap that destroys most entrepreneurs. He was measuring his worth by his results, and those results were never quite good enough. He'd land a client and feel excited for maybe a day, then immediately start worrying about where the next client would come from. He'd complete a project successfully, but instead of feeling satisfied, he'd just feel relieved that it was over. He was on a treadmill of anxiety, and every result only brought temporary relief before the worry started again. The breaking point came on an ordinary Tuesday morning. Richard opened his laptop, went through his usual routine of checking all his metrics, and realized he'd spent 90 minutes obsessing over numbers without doing a single minute of actual work. He sat there staring at his screen and asked himself a question that changed everything. What if I stopped checking these numbers entirely and just focused on doing the best work of my life? That question terrified him. His entire identity was wrapped up in those metrics. But something deeper inside him recognized the truth. He wasn't happy. He wasn't fulfilled. And despite all his monitoring and measuring, his business wasn't growing the way he wanted it to. So he made a decision that seemed crazy at the time. He decided to go 30 days without checking any results whatsoever. No bank account, no analytics, no client count, just work. Instead, Richard created what he called his daily excellence checklist. It had 5 items, and every single one was about the work itself, not the outcomes. First, spend 2 hours on deep client work with 0 distractions. Second, write 1 piece of valuable content. Third, have one genuine conversation with someone in his industry. Fourth, read for 30 minutes in his field. Fifth, review and improve one internal system or process. These were all inputs, all activities he could control completely, all things that required nothing except his own commitment to excellence. The first week was brutal. His mind kept wanting to check the numbers. He felt like he was flying blind. Every few hours, his hand would automatically reach for his phone to check something, and he'd have to stop himself. But something interesting started happening. Without the constant interruption of checking results, Richard entered deeper states of concentration than he'd experienced in years. His client work improved noticeably, his content became more thoughtful, his conversations were more present and genuine. By week 3, something had shifted inside him. Richard realized he was actually enjoying the work itself for the first time in years. He wasn't doing it to get somewhere else. He wasn't performing to hit a number. He was crafting something excellent because excellence itself had become the reward. He'd wake up excited to execute his checklist, not because of what it would produce, but because he knew he was developing mastery. When the 30 days ended, Richard looked at his numbers. His revenue had increased by 40%. His website traffic had doubled. He had 3 new client inquiries waiting in his inbox. But here's what really mattered. Richard didn't care about those numbers the way he used to. They were nice, but they weren't the source of his satisfaction anymore. His satisfaction came from knowing he'd done excellent work every single day. This transformation reveals something profound about how achievement actually works. Your brain is designed to respond to immediate feedback. When you focus on results, you're asking your brain to get motivated by things that are distant and uncertain. But when you focus on the work itself, when you make excellence the goal, your brain gets immediate feedback with every task you complete. Well, you experience satisfaction in real time. This creates a positive cycle that sustains motivation naturally. The science backs this up completely. Studies of high performers across every field show that they share a common characteristic. They've learned to derive satisfaction from the process rather than the outcome. Olympic athletes talk about falling in love with training. Master craftsmen describe the joy of perfecting technique. Successful writers speak about the pleasure of crafting a single perfect sentence. They've all learned to shift their dopamine response from results to process. This shift fundamentally changes your relationship with your work. When you're obsessed with results, you're always looking ahead, always dissatisfied with where you are, always feeling incomplete. But when you're obsessed with the work, every day becomes complete unto itself. You either did excellent work or you didn't. You either honored your standards or you didn't. This creates a sense of control and dignity that no result can provide. Richard's story illustrates another crucial point. When you stop obsessing over results, you actually get better results. This seems paradoxical, but it makes perfect sense when you understand the mechanism. Results come from skills. Skills come from focused practice. Focused practice requires presence. Presence is impossible when you're constantly checking outcomes. Therefore, result obsession prevents the very thing that produces results. Think about what this means for your life right now. Whatever you're trying to achieve, whether it's building a business, developing a skill, improving your health, or creating something meaningful, you have 2 choices. You can obsess over the outcomes, checking and measuring and worrying, staying anxious and distracted, or you can obsess over the work, defining what excellence looks like, committing to daily standards, and finding satisfaction in the execution itself. One path leads to anxiety and mediocrity, the other leads to mastery and fulfillment. One keeps you stuck in an endless cycle of temporary highs and crushing lows. The other builds genuine confidence and sustainable success. The choice seems obvious when you see it clearly, but making this choice requires understanding exactly how to structure your daily work for excellence rather than outcomes. So how do you actually make this shift? How do you stop the obsessive result checking and redirect all that energy into the work itself? It starts with understanding a fundamental principle. You need to replace your outcome metrics with process metrics. You need to build a system that tells you whether you're succeeding based on what you control. The first step happens before your workday even begins. Successful people have learned to start their morning by defining excellence for that specific day, not by reviewing yesterday's results, not by checking what happened overnight, but by asking themselves, what would make today excellent from a process standpoint? This question shifts your entire mental framework from reactive to proactive, from outcome-dependent to process-driven. Here's what this looks like in practice. Before you open your email, before you check any metrics, before you let the world tell you what needs your attention, you sit down with a blank page and write down 3 to 5 specific work activities that represent excellence in your field. These aren't vague intentions like work hard or be productive. These are concrete, measurable actions that you can complete regardless of external circumstances. Or salesperson. It might be make 20 quality prospect calls, send 5 personalized follow-up messages, study 1 successful sales conversation, recording, practice your presentation twice, and read 15 minutes about customer psychology. Notice something important here. Not one of these items is about closing deals. Not one is about hitting quota. Every single item is about executing the activities that, when done consistently with excellence, naturally produce sales results. For a writer, the list might include write for 2 uninterrupted hours, edit yesterday's work with fresh eyes, read 20 pages of excellent writing, outline tomorrow's piece, and analyze 1 successful article in your genre. Again, nothing about publication, nothing about readership numbers, nothing about income, everything about craft. This approach works because it gives you complete control over your success. You win the day by executing your process, period. The market might crash, clients might cancel, opportunities might fall through, but none of that determines whether you succeeded. Your success is determined entirely by whether you honored your commitment to excellent work. This creates psychological freedom that most people never experience. But here's where most people struggle. They create these process goals, but they can't resist checking results. They do their excellent work in the morning, then spend the afternoon refreshing their email, checking their stats, monitoring their progress. This completely undermines the benefit of the process-focused approach. You have to make a rule. No checking results during work time. None. When you're in your work blocks, you're executing your process with complete focus. Results get reviewed at a designated time, perhaps weekly or monthly, but never during execution mode. Let me tell you about a woman named Alexandra who took this principle to an extreme that most people would consider crazy. Alexandra was a fitness coach trying to build an online business. She spent 2 years obsessively checking her social media followers, her email list size, her website visitors, and her income. Despite working incredibly hard, her business barely grew, and she was burning out fast. Then Alexandra heard this principle about focusing on work instead of results, and she decided to test it radically. She deleted all analytics apps from her phone. She blocked access to her social media stats. She set up her banking so she couldn't see her account balance except once per month. She created a daily work protocol, create 1 high-quality training video, write 1 valuable email to her list, engage authentically with 10 people in her community, exercise for an hour using the methods she taught, and study successful coaches for 30 minutes for 6 months. Alexandra had no idea if her business was growing. She didn't know her follower count. She didn't know her income. She only knew whether she executed her daily process. And here's what happened. She became completely absorbed in the work itself. Her videos became more authentic and helpful because she wasn't performing for numbers. Her emails became more personal and valuable because she wasn't writing for metrics. Her community engagement became genuine because she wasn't networking for gain. When Alexandra finally looked at her numbers after 6 months, her business had tripled. But more importantly, She'd fallen in love with her work again. She'd rediscovered why she became a fitness coach in the first place. The obsession with growth had been killing her passion. The shift to process obsession had restored it. This illustrates a critical distinction between amateurs and professionals. Amateurs are outcome focused. They want to know if they're winning. They need external validation. They measure success by recognition and rewards. Professionals are process focused. They define success by whether they maintain their standards. They get satisfaction from craftsmanship. They measure success by the quality of their execution. This professional standard becomes your new identity. You're no longer someone who's trying to achieve a result. You're someone who does excellent work. Period. That's who you are. Whether anyone notices, whether it produces immediate outcomes, whether it gets rewarded today or not, doesn't change your commitment to your craft. This identity shift is what separates people who build lasting success from people who chase temporary wins. Now, you need to understand something crucial. This doesn't mean you ignore results completely. Results matter. They provide information about whether your process is effective. But there's a massive difference between using results as information and using results as validation. When you check results as information, you're asking, is my process producing the outcomes I designed it to produce? When you check results as validation, you're asking, am I good enough yet? One question makes you stronger, the other makes you weaker. One leads to process refinement, the other leads to emotional dependency. The key is separating your worth and your daily satisfaction from outcomes, while still using outcomes as data to improve your process over time. Now we need to talk about what happens when you commit to this path long term, because this is where the real magic occurs. When you shift from result obsession to work obsession, you don't just change your daily experience, you change your entire trajectory. You enter what I call the mastery principle. And this is where ordinary people start producing extraordinary results. Here's what the mastery principle means. When you focus on results, you're always looking for shortcuts. You're always asking, what's the fastest way to get there? But when you focus on the work itself, you start asking a completely different question. How can I make this better? That question, asked consistently over months and years, transforms you into someone operating at a level most people never reach. Masters in any field share this common trait. They've stopped competing with other people and started competing with their own previous best. A master craftsman doesn't build a chair to sell a chair. He builds a chair to see if he can make it better than the last one. A master surgeon doesn't perform an operation to complete a procedure. She performs it to see if she can execute with even greater precision than yesterday. This internal standard of excellence, this obsession with incremental improvement in the work itself, is what creates mastery. You've probably heard about the 10,000-hour rule, the idea that it takes 10,000 hours of practice to become world-class at anything. But here's what most people miss. It's not just 10,000 hours. It's 10,000 hours of process-focused, quality-obsessed, improvement-driven practice. You can spend 10,000 hours checking your results and worrying about outcomes, and you'll still be average. But spend 10,000 hours obsessed with making your work better, and you'll become exceptional. This distinction matters enormously when you face setbacks, and you will face setbacks. There will be periods where your results don't match your effort. There will be times when excellent work doesn't produce immediate outcomes. This is where most people quit. They've been doing good work, but they're not seeing results, so they assume the work doesn't matter. They abandon their process and go searching for a different strategy, a better technique, a new approach. But the person who's truly obsessed with the work responds completely differently to setbacks. They don't interpret lack of results as failure of their process. They see it as information. They ask, am I really doing excellent work, or am I just going through the motions? Where can I raise my standards? What aspect of my craft needs deeper development? They use the plateau as an opportunity to go even deeper into their work, to refine their skills even further, to elevate their standards even higher. This resilience, this ability to persist when results aren't visible, comes naturally when your satisfaction is derived from the work itself rather than from outcomes. You don't need results to feel successful when you know you executed your process with integrity. You don't need external validation when you've met your own internal standards. This makes you nearly unstoppable because you're not dependent on circumstances or other people's responses to maintain your motivation. Let me tell you about a man named Gregory who embodies this principle perfectly. Gregory was a software developer who spent 15 years working in corporate jobs. Always frustrated that his innovative ideas never got implemented, he decided to leave and build his own product. For the first 2 years, barely anyone used what he created. By result-focused standards, he was failing completely. But Gregory had made a decision at the beginning. He decided that his measure of success would be whether he wrote the most elegant, efficient, beautiful code he was capable of writing that day. Every evening, he'd review his code and ask himself, did I take shortcuts or did I craft this with excellence? Most days, he could honestly say he'd done excellent work. That satisfaction sustained him through 2 years of minimal results. Then something shifted. A few users found his product and started telling others. Within 6 months, his user base exploded. Within a year, he had built something that major companies wanted to acquire. But here's the important part. Gregory's code was exceptional because he'd spent 2 years obsessing over quality instead of obsessing over growth. His product succeeded because the work itself was excellent, not because he'd optimized for quick wins or viral growth. When reporters asked Gregory how he stayed motivated during those 2 difficult years, his answer was simple. I wasn't motivated by the results I didn't have. I was motivated by the code I was writing. Every day I got to solve interesting problems and craft elegant solutions. That was enough. This is the mindset that builds remarkable things. This is the approach that creates lasting success. So what does this mean for you right now, today, this moment? It means you have a choice to make. You can continue the exhausting cycle of result obsession, constantly checking, constantly measuring, constantly feeling like you're not quite there yet. Or you can make the shift to work obsession, where every day becomes an opportunity to execute with excellence, regardless of immediate outcomes. This shift starts with a simple decision. Tomorrow morning, before you check anything, before you let the world tell you where you stand, you're going to define what excellent work looks like for that day. You're going to write down 3 to 5 specific activities that represent quality execution in your field. Then you're going to complete those activities with complete focus and craftsmanship at the end of the day. You're going to evaluate yourself based solely on whether you honored your commitment to those activities. You're going to do this for 30 days without checking the results you normally obsess over. No bank account refreshing, no follower counting, no metric monitoring during your work time. Just 30 days of falling in love with the work itself. 30 days of measuring success by execution rather than outcomes. 30 days of building the process-focused mindset that separates masters from amateurs. I promise you this, if you commit to this approach. Something profound will shift. You'll rediscover the satisfaction that comes from craftsmanship. You'll develop skills at a rate you never thought possible. You'll build resilience that makes you unstoppable. And yes, the results you've been desperately chasing will start appearing as natural consequences of your excellent work. But more importantly, you'll become someone different. You'll become someone who takes pride in their work, regardless of external recognition. You'll become someone who maintains standards even when nobody's watching. You'll become someone whose sense of worth comes from integrity and excellence rather than achievements and accolades. This is the path to genuine success. This is how mastery is built. This is how you create a life of meaning and accomplishment, not by obsessing over results, but by falling completely, utterly, absolutely in love with the work itself. Starting right now, starting today, the choice is yours.